Welcome to RPE Spotlight, a monthly series uplifting the expertise of California preventionists. Each month, we spotlight a new topic presented by and for RPE programs in California. Thanks for joining us. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Sarah, she, her pronouns from Valor US, formerly CalCasa. Welcome to our September RPE Spotlight. We have a couple folks from YWCA Silicon Valley here to talk about some of the work that they've been doing with their youth leadership group around school policy change. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Maggie and Alondra. Take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today to hang out with us to talk about policy change. Like Sarah said, my name is Maggie. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Prevention Education and Engagement Coordinator at YWCA Golden Gate Silicon Valley, formerly just Silicon Valley. We merged with San Francisco and Marin a few months ago. And I'm here today with my coworker, Alondra. Alondra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Alondra Hernandez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I'm the prevention specialist for YWCA Golden Gate Silicon Valley. So before we get started, we'd like to just let you know about what our presentation will consist of. So by the end of the presentation, we hope that you will learn about lessons, modules, and activities in our policy curriculum, practice a policy activity to use with youth leadership groups, and learn about barriers, challenges, and successes of the curriculum development and building youth capacity in policy change work.
All right, so the overall curriculum, some background on what's going on. The goal of this curriculum was to introduce students to policy using examples and the understandings of leadership and power. So through a bunch of discussions with the students, they're going to have different opportunities to address things that they're seeing in their school campuses and cultivate change. I do want to give a shout out. The curriculum is loosely based off this wonderful book that I even pulled out to show you the cover of today if my filter wouldn't work. It is called Change, A Student Guide to Social Action, written by Scott Myers-Lipton. He is a professor of psychology at San Jose State University. It was an amazing resource for me as we were figuring out how to talk to high school students. It's a course that he runs at San Jose State that walks college students through basically their own policy change initiative during a semester. And so it's very loosely based. Some of his ideas and concepts, we kind of used his theories as talking to leading college students and figured out how to make it fit for our audience, which is specifically high school students in Santa Clara County. I want to also talk a little bit about why we did this. The way that we see it is there's two ways to kind of go about policy change. The first is to, as adults in this space, do all the research, read the policy, identify things we think are wrong with the policy, talk to the staff, get it changed. Very simplified version, right? Of a very more complex problem. Or there's a secondary option where it can be youth-led. We already have this leadership team cultivated through the RPE program that's been educated on gender-based violence issues and other things when it comes to inequalities. And we wanted to give them a chance to use their voice, learn about policy, and then use them and their needs as the lead for what we wanted to do as far as our policy change initiatives. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit from a more general overview to walking through the actual policy. And we've got what is policy, leadership, power, policy change in action, and then the wrap up that we love with our students. So Alondra, if you want to switch over from the PowerPoint to the curriculum, you'll all be able to have access to this curriculum PDF in the follow-up after this presentation. So let's just switch over there for just a second. The main rule of thumb that we tried to follow for this whole curriculum was ask questions before defining, before giving the students answers. You want to allow the students to define their own space. And that started with our discussion of what is policy. We wanted the students to create a group definition for what they understood as policy. We provided a couple of examples, different things that they could kind of think about. Basically, what is policy? And this larger idea. And then we encouraged them to drill down to personal issues. So what was something that you as a student needed right now? And then trying to reframe those needs, those wants, and those problems that the students were facing into a more large societal issue. And we did that using our SMART guide, which is the first activity that we did with our students, wanting them to pick a specific problem, make their outcomes measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Keeping in mind, we run this curriculum in a virtual setting. So if you're getting back to like an in-person space, some of these things may look differently. For this activity specifically, we put the students in breakout rooms and really encourage them to think of any issue. We weren't trying to make them focus on what we wanted them to change in their school. It could be something like, I need more screen time. All right, make that a SMART goal. I want more Instagram followers. Okay, make that a SMART goal. Letting them pick any topic can make it a little bit more fun and not make them feel like they're like, oh, I gotta go change the world. Let me just have fun and create maybe even a ridiculous SMART goal, but thinking about it in these different things. I think the example I gave them was like, everyone needs a private jet. And I made that a SMART goal. And it was just a fun way to start thinking about making an attainable goal. Just again, getting them thinking, putting them in a breakout room and bringing them back. What we found specifically with this what is policy piece is that we had to take more time here than we expected to really understand what is policy and get them to go from these fun ideas where they can think of anything and start to bring them to, okay, at school, in your community, what can we do? So then week 2, we presented some relevant policies that existed in their school and started to have conversations about those. How do they affect you? Do you see any problems? Did you know that these policies existed? Because we knew that even if the answer to those questions was no, that's still data that we can use moving forward into maybe what we want to implement in the following school year. Then that 3rd week, we put that research on them. So we've gone really big, any policy you want. Here are some things we want to focus on. Now you pick one, read it, and explain to us what it is and what you saw in it. We used this as a way for us to know what they cared about so that we could begin to tailor the rest of the content going through the curriculum towards what they were interested in, instead of just, again, throwing at them what we were interested in. Because again, the point of this is to be very like youth-led, let them come up with their ideas, and we're there to support them.
At week 4, we went into leadership. Real quickly before I continue, can everyone read this fine or should I zoom in a little more? Okay.
I'm seeing a zoom in more, please, in the chat, just to touch.
Okay, awesome. Let's try that. How's that?
Is that better?
Works for me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty then. So at week 4, we did our leadership. So after we laid the groundwork that Maggie was talking about, which was what is policy, we decided to focus on leadership. And our first activity was, what is leadership to you? So you're going to get to see a live version of this activity. And we have a picture down here below of the one that our students did. Me and Maggie will go through this activity in just a moment so you can see how you could do it with your students. But I want to talk a little bit about what the purpose of the activity was. So we decided that we wanted our students to identify people that they saw as leaders and identify what characteristics constitute these people as leaders. And the point of that was that we wanted to have our youth to tell us about people that they considered leaders so that when we continued our curriculum, they could refer back to these people and it was somebody that was applicable to them, somebody that they knew. So it wasn't us talking about leaders from, I don't know, our generation. It was somebody that they were aware of and could relate to. Now, after we did this presentation or this activity, we got into a deeper conversation on what defines a leader and how those characteristics also apply to characteristics that our students have so that they could understand that they're also leaders and they are also people in their community that can make change. So after we did the activity, Maggie has a second part that she'll talk about when we do the live presentation, which is we did a poll and other stuff, but you'll see that in just a moment.
All right, so then we've done policy, we've done what is it? We've done leadership, recognizing the characteristics that the students have within themselves. And we talked about power. And a lot of the goal of the conversation about power was that power wasn't a scary word. It wasn't something that they had to take. It wasn't something that they didn't have. It was actually something that they did have and that current students were using to their advantage, kind of equating power with a form of influence, and everyone has influence. We used this discussion, we tried to come up with a couple of different ways. You'll see, right? We have activities, we have videos, we have readings. So this was the lesson where we tried videos because everyone learns a little bit differently. So we have a couple of videos here that talk about advocacy, that talk about power. And so we would watch these videos, talk about what they saw, what did they learn about power, how did it influence their definitions of power and influence. And then to bring it in, we brought in a general community thing that was going on. There was a current event happening in a nearby high school. They were organizing a protest and making demands for their school, talking about how those students were using their power and they're just the same age and have just the same knowledge and influence as our students to try to make change and raise awareness at their schools. And our final discussion around power was just, how do you feel about power? Is it a scary word? Is it something that you feel like you have? When do you feel most powerful? And then thinking about the different policies we've been talking about, how can power and influence be used as an advantage? The one caveat I will have here, you'll find at the end of this whole document, there are a couple of lessons that we ended up not using in our timeline with our students because it didn't quite fit in the virtual setting and what we felt like we could really accomplish in a virtual space. But a lot of those pieces are about the generation of power, investing in your stakeholders, finding your partners, recruiting more members, because a team of 5 can do a lot less than a team of 20. So how do you bring those people in? And a lot of those pieces fit in really well right after you've done leadership and power. If your students identify that, hey, we really don't feel like we have this part of it under control, or we really need these voices because we recognize that to change these policies, we need this person's buy-in. And so that's when you can go to those lessons and bring in that stakeholder piece or bring in that recruitment piece if you need more upperclassmen or some kind of other demographic.
And that led us into policy change in action. So at week 6, we shifted gears into seeing how policy occurs in our communities. What actually is the effect of policy on our students or just on people around us? Now, this portion of our curriculum lasted 3 weeks. We noticed that our youth needed more real life examples of policy change, especially examples of youth doing the work so that it could, again, feel applicable to them. Therefore, we researched organizations in our area that were student-led who were doing gender-based violence prevention work. We luckily found a couple of speakers who were willing to come talk to our students, and they were also in the Bay Area. And so we prepped our students to come to our meeting with questions to ask the guest speaker. One of the guest speakers that we had was Halima from Alliance for Girls. So Halima came and spoke to our students about her campaign, which was #NotOneMoreGirl, and how the entire project came about and the whole process of it, and had her speak about how her students used a specific theory and they had research and all the work that they got to do in their community and what the outcomes were. So me and Maggie, or Maggie and I and our students left that meeting feeling very inspired because we felt like, okay, this is something we could do. Although things are kind of slow right now, we're going to get to it. It's going to be a slow process, but eventually we'll enact some sort of policy change. And for our students, they were excited and they were really, they kept asking us how else could they get involved with that specific campaign, but also how could we do something similar? So that's when I feel like things shifted for us and our students began to realize, okay, people are doing this. So we're not the only people doing it. We're not alone. And it is something that we can achieve. And that was really helpful to help us kind of navigate the quiet spaces or like the uncertainty in our youth. So the following week of our curriculum, week 7, we decided to debrief about the presentations that the speakers had shared and just the whole meeting in general. Now, aside from bringing in speakers, we also began to incorporate current events. At the time, there were some current events related to sexual assault on school campuses in the Bay Area. And the news report that we showed our students had a portion where the anchorwoman asked about school policies to their current principal at that school. So we asked students to share their thoughts or opinions on the matter. And then we spoke a little more about how policy and how change in certain policies could prevent a situation like this from occurring could prevent this from occurring. And then our students began to see the relationship between the two. So lastly, after we did our current events and we tied that in, we had our students kind of practice and engage on what that policy change would look like in real life. Halima, when she came to give our presentation, gave us a beautiful laid out, which is actually here in this curriculum. I'll show it to y'all right now, step by step about how you can do your own public comment. And she showed us videos of her youth doing these public comments. So we thought it would be really nice to practice this with our youth and to practice it ourselves, because I don't know about any of y'all, but I have never given a public comment at any school board or city council meeting. So we decided that our students would benefit from this, and we created 4 random topics and gave the students opportunity to decide which topic they would be advocating for. Our examples that we had were, you could advocate for all gender sports, for a late start at school, for Fridays off, or advocating for a better reporting method of assault on school campuses. We gave our students an entire meeting period to compile their small scripts, basically just filling the blanks of the outline that we had provided them with. And we made sure to let them know that number 4, so provide supporting points for the action, would be the most difficult part, because that would be the part where we would all have to get together and do our own research, right? So we look into reasons why our policy would be important, what is the difference that our policy would be making. So for our students in that time, we asked them just kind of, you put down what you think or why you think this policy would make sense. But as we continue, we let them know that that would be something that we would work on to put actual sources and to get actual data. So then that way it would make sense when we go to a school board meeting or a city council meeting when we're doing that part of the public comment. Now, this was a bit difficult to have our students participate, but luckily we had some students who were just like, okay, you know what, it's not perfect, but I'm gonna do it anyways. And I was like, great, that's all we need, right? We're not actually at a city council meeting or anything like that. But after one student participated, the rest of them were more open to do so. And we gave them the option, like say, if for most of them got up to number 3, state the action you're advocating for, and then just a little bit of number 4, but then they got really nervous and didn't know if they were saying the right things and just very self-conscious. So they didn't feel like they could really tell us the rest of the public comment. But that was okay. We all had the same issue as we mentioned before. We just wanted them to get in the habit of, okay, speaking what this language would look like, how short it had to be. And that was really helpful.
So we ran this curriculum in a semestered, structured format. So this curriculum was kind of based like a starting and then an ending, because the students were heading out for summer and we weren't going to resume any kind of meetings with them until this fall semester. So our wrap up, we decided that the goal was going to be, okay, we've done all this background work. We've tried to do a little bit of like confidence boosting when it comes to leadership and power. They've done this presentation-esque prep. Let's really try to close us out with something that Alondra and I can take away and be prepared to bring them back ready to jump right back in the fall. So in our wrap up, we kind of just did a final thoughts discussion and did some polls. Alondra and I had been tracking any idea that they had come up with for the entire semester. And we put it in a poll, and we had each of the students in our group rank which ones they were most interested in this poll. So the final result was, okay, great. We've got a 1, 2, and 3 as of these goals the students want to change on their school campus. All right, they've thought about it. This is what they care about. And this is where we know that we should maybe lead our research or figure out a structure for the upcoming semester. Start asking those questions and have something else for them to look at and start to explore and implement when we get back in the fall. So yay, you got a topic. That's a great result. The one thing I do want to say is, did the students actually learn? Did they come back in the fall excited? The answer was a wonderful yes. We had a very small group in this virtual curriculum of about 5 or 6 students. They were all from 3 schools, and they were brought in to one group. Now they're currently at 3 different schools in a much larger group. So we've got a couple returning members from this policy group in each of our current cohorts. Each of these students, the first day we ask, okay, now that we're back on campus, how are things going? What do we like? What do we not like? And they were the first students to raise their hand. They came ready with, here's what's wrong. Here's what I want to change. Let's do it. Lots of ideas, lots of energy. They had spent their summers watching campaigns, have loads of ideas for ways to raise awareness and improve based on what they've seen on other campuses and their own. So we really feel like this is effective curriculum in showing them what their options are for change, that they can do the change, and that we as facilitators value their opinions. Because they came in being like, I can share this idea with these two facilitators and they're going to listen and they're going to help me. They know they have a voice and they're really excited to really start to implement that change. And that's a summary of our curriculum. Alondra's scrolling down right now to our issue development, recruitment, and define strategy prompts. Again, these were not ones that we implemented. We found that our students had a lot of questions. We had lots of underclassmen who didn't know what campus looked like, and we'll be implementing those strategies now that we're back on campus and ready to really know what's going on.
And in the curriculum too, there's author's notes. So me and Maggie go and we have notes on every single part of the curriculum about what were some challenges, what worked well, what didn't work well, so that you all can take this curriculum and make it unique to your students, right? Because we're all in different parts of, I'm going to say California, maybe we're in different parts of the US. And so we understand that maybe it has to be flexible, right? So, and again, if you'll ever need any help or have any questions about certain parts of the curriculum, our contact information is on there as well for you all to reach out. So what we're going to do now is our live presentation of one of the activities. 1 second, let me just fix my computer around. Okay, so I'm going to share a whiteboard and Maggie and I will be the facilitators and all of you are going to be our students for today. So yay, you all get to take a break from facilitating. All right, whiteboard, share. Oh, perfect, the circle's already there. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, before you all write on here, in case anyone doesn't know how to annotate on a whiteboard, you're gonna go to view options, which is gonna be at the top, right? Okay, because mine looks a little bit different. So it's gonna be on the top. I believe it's where the little ellipses are, the 3 little dots.
Mine says view options.
Okay, cool. It just says view options, and then you'll click annotate. And that should give you the ability to write on this whiteboard that I am sharing right now. So what you all are going to do is, once you have figured that out, and if you haven't, let us know. For those of you who have, you're going to start to list people that you think are leaders or leaders that you know of on the left-hand side of this circle. And I will move things around so then that way we can all, it won't get all jumbled up. I think I'm the only one that has the availability to move things around.
Yes, so as your leaders, if you are somewhere where you can't annotate or can't even type in the chat box, you're of course welcome to put your answers in the chat box and Alondra and I can lift those up, as well as if you want to come off mute. Keeping in mind this is recorded, and so do so at your own comfort. We can also add those for you as well.
So I'll give us a moment to do that. If you click text, it's way easier. And then once you unclick the text, it's when it pops up on the screen itself.
People you see as leaders, names of leaders, leaders in the most, names of leaders. So we'll do the second part of the activity will be characteristics. Right now, we're just thinking about people.
Just names. It could be people in the media.
Yeah, it's up to your own interpretation of leader, your own interpretation of leader. All right, I'm going to give it just one more moment. Alondra, I'm going to add some of the chat comments.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Your leaders. All right, Maggie, do we have anything else in the chat, or is that?
That's all for now. Let's go ahead and move on to the second question.
Okay, awesome. So now the second part of this activity is we all chose these leaders for a reason, right? When we said the word leader, this was the name that popped up into our heads. So now what we ask our youth is to think about the reasons why you chose this person as your leader. And we give them the opportunity to share, if they would like, who they wrote down and why they chose them. So if anyone would like to share who they wrote down and why they chose them, you can either one, raise your hand or unmute yourself and let us know.
Or of course, you can always drop it in the chat.
Chose Joe Biden because he is the president of the United States, the leader of the free world and all that good stuff.
Okay, thank you, Willie. All right, anybody else? All right, so when we had our students who didn't really want to participate, they were kind of quiet, we get it, they were tired, we decided to go through the list and choose one of the leaders, maybe one that we weren't aware about, and ask, oh, who wrote down, let's see, Mariam Kaba. Who wrote down Mariam Kaba, and can you tell us why you wrote that person down? Oh, Sarah, you're muted.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't find my mute button. It was like very frantic. I think when you're viewing the whiteboard, you have to X out of that. Yes, that was me. I was actually just putting it in the chat. I wrote down Mariam Kaba, and there were several other names too. She was just the one that popped into my head because she is currently one of the people on the forefront of envisioning community-based responses to sexual violence that don't rely on systems of oppression, that are envisioning solutions that don't create more pain and suffering. And I think that we as a field, as a movement, have been having a lot of conversations about how to do more of that. And she is making a lot of that happen and has been for a long time. And she makes information free and accessible a lot of the time. And so that's what popped into my head.
Awesome, thank you. And
Thank you,
in that
Sarah.
scenario too, yeah, that's new information for all of us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Alondra,
right.
I want to uplift real quick from the chat.
Mhm.
I got it. Teachers are good role models, which is why I added the role models piece here on the slide. So would you move that back into the leaders are ...
Okay. Wait, you want me to leave it here, right?
The role models. No, role models.
Oh, the role models. Got you.
Goes back
Okay.
in the leaders are. Yeah.
Okay, then. All right, so that leads us into the second part of this activity. So what we're going to do now is we did the left side. Let's focus on the center, which our leaders are. So here is where you're going to put the words, the characteristics of the leaders that you chose, and why they are leaders. So what are some characteristics that you thought of that made this person a leader?
What makes the people that you chose leaders in whatever their space is?
I'll make this circle bigger.
Alondra, I have influential in the chat. I'll type it up. You just drag around.
Okay, thank you.
What else? What other things make these people leaders? Or what makes someone a role model? We can even drive down into some of the words within our circle. What makes someone a role model? Okay, I'm seeing motivational, inspiring in the chat. These are all awesome.
Yes, okay.
I like this one, valuing others' opinions. All right, so we are getting so many here. We could probably come up with characteristics of leaders forever. But this is how the activity goes, right? We get our leaders and then we start drilling down into our characteristics.
Alrighty then. So then we review our characteristics with our youth. We tell us, okay, well then these are the definitions that we have for leaders. It's accessibility, it's inspiring, influential, brave, they're conversation starters, role models, they have a clear vision, passionate, influence change, motivational, focus on specific goals, well-spoken, value others' opinions, supportive of others, willing to make the tough decisions, and willing to share their power and advocate on behalf of others. Now we ask our students, all right, so now let's think about the non-traditional definition of a leader. Let's think about maybe something that you, a characteristic that you see as fit for a leader, but others wouldn't think about it because it's not something that usually is labeled or listed in this inner circle. And we're going to go ahead and put those on the right-hand side of the whiteboard. What are some non-traditional definitions or characteristics of a leader that apply to you but might not apply to everyone else? Things that are important for you that a leader should have.
I see authenticity in the chat.
Alrighty then.
Awesome. Let's leave it at that. I'm loving these.
Okay, so we have has a family, work balance, informal, accountable, authentic, vulnerable, honest. They center others rather than themselves. They have character, trustworthy, and they are humble. Yeah, right. So the list could go on and on because we're all different people with different perspectives, and there's a lot of, we hold different values, right? So we're going to define a leader one way, maybe, while another person might be like, nope, that doesn't apply to me. I think my leader should have this. Now, what we did with our students is we compiled this list of characteristics that they believe their leader should have and definitions or characteristics that they think that the leaders that they mentioned had. And we created a poll with all these characteristics. Maggie, do you want to, actually, sorry, Maggie, real quickly. Before we did that, we told our students there's multiple ways that we could define a leader. But for the purpose of our meetings, our definition of a leader that we came up with is somebody who thinks about the group and helps it function. And so thinking about that functionality of a group, that's what led us to then compile all of these characteristics into a poll that Maggie will share more about what we did with.
Yeah, so the funny thing was we had a student who wrote me in the who are your leaders, which basically was the whole point of the exercise, was to help them recognize leadership characteristics within themselves. So that student kind of totally was like, I know exactly what they're trying to get at right now. And even we asked the question, okay, so what are those characteristics? And they provided us with some of the things that they felt made them a leader. So we took their huge list. We're not going to do it here for the sake of time, but we have first asked the question, what of these characteristics do you feel like are most important for a leader? Click as many or as few as you want. We had some that were put up on the board that didn't get any responses there. For example, I think we have influential on ours and they had influential on theirs. And yet nobody, when it was what is most important, chose influential as what was most important. Their most importance were understanding and making a difference. Then we relaunched the poll and we asked the secondary question. What of these characteristics do you feel like you have? They felt like theirs were the most genuine, understanding, brave, and helpful. So again, just working to help your students identify the different leadership characteristics they have within themselves. This will also be useful if you get down the line to things like recruitment. You want to acknowledge that not everyone is a public speaker, right? Some people do not want to speak on a loudspeaker, but they're really good at writing speeches, or they're incredibly artistic, so they should be making the flyers, or they have just other strengths that we can lead to. And so using this activity to kind of start learning about what your students value in themselves the most, to kind of create that team atmosphere where everyone can be a leader with a different responsibility. Do we have any questions about this specific activity before we go on? There will be time at the end for questions after we go through the challenges and successes of the program. No? If they're typing, I'll see it in a second. Alondra, why don't we switch back over to the slides?
Yeah, and just to show you all real quickly, if you didn't get a chance to see it. Oh, wait. Now I'm sharing. Can you see it? Okay. This is the one that our students created. So their leaders were AOC, Amanda Corbin, BTS, Marsha P. Johnson, their reasonings, and then their non-traditional definitions as well.
I liked the one that was give positive energy, because they're the cheerleader, the person who uplifts the whole team, is definitely a leadership role.
Alrighty then, Maggie, is the chat all good for us to move forward?
Yes, chat is all good. Let's go ahead and move forward. Also, time check, Alondra. We got 22 minutes.
Got you. All right. So our barriers and challenges. So some of the barriers that we encountered was an education gap on policy. As we talked about at the beginning of the curriculum, we noticed, which actually shouldn't come to as a shock to us, because did we know about policy when we were in high school? No. To this day, I'm still learning about policy, how it like was all made up. Gives you a headache, how it affects us all, how many policies there are, how minute policies can be. And so it was really difficult for us to then translate that information to our youth, right? There is a pandemic going on. There's a lot of external factors and a lot of external issues happening right now that it might not seem very applicable to them, or they might think it's not relevant, but it is. So a barrier was that large education back. We had to lay a lot of groundwork, and we thought we were going to hit the ground running, but that was not the case. Now, it also made it that our curriculum at the beginning was a bit definition heavy, but it was very needed because our students needed that info to be able to build on that education. So Maggie and I spent a lot of time looking for creative ways to make learning about policy fun and applicable to them, which is why we have so many real life examples, because we found that worked with our students. But again, every group is different, so maybe something might work for you all that didn't work for us. And especially discussing the importance of how policy does affect them. It was very important that we translated that these policies aren't just a statement that exists. They have an effect, and that effect trickles into your school campus. And so it was making them understand that. The other barrier was virtual school year, which limited our campus climate information of our students. When we got into the conversation of, hey, what do you see on your campus that you don't like? Our students were like, what campus? Most of our youth were freshmen. And so the last memory that they had about school before the pandemic was middle school. And so the only information that was applicable was middle school information, which was fine. We encouraged them to still share personal stories because some of the policies are the same within the district and they trickle over, and we were able to learn things that they were interested in, like restorative justice practices. Our students had noticed a suspension wasn't a way of fixing someone's behavior, and they didn't think that that was useful. So what could we do about that, or how could we change that? We learned a bunch about our students through these personal stories, but it was very difficult for us to navigate what do your bathrooms look like on campus? Are there gender neutral bathrooms? What does a space look like? Is there signage that tells you where your Title IX coordinator is? Is there orientation that tells you what Title IX is, right? So there was a lot of these missing pieces that now Maggie and I are being able to learn a lot more about.
Yeah, so in navigating these challenges, just a couple of things that we encourage you to consider if you're looking to implement or talk to your students about youth. Again, this first one will especially look different if you are able to go in person. We're finding that the students are a lot more chatty now that we can see our faces, and vice versa. Our majority of our lessons was me and Alondra as heads with a bunch of dark squares. So we're doing a lot of navigating in the silence and the lack of participation, which really started to come down to provide them with a variety of ways to communicate. Some like to do the chat, some wanted to message us privately. Sometimes if we put them in breakout rooms, they were silent. Sometimes the breakout rooms were like alive with conversation and they came back with lots of things to say. So kind of, again, playing to each student's strengths, as well as sitting in the silence and letting it happen, because someone's eventually going to speak up. Also asking those open-ended questions. We also found that especially when you're navigating a new topic, sometimes you ask a question and the reason that people aren't responding is they actually have a question, not an answer. They don't want to be called on for the answer. So if we were sitting with silence for a significant amount of time, it was, does anyone have questions about the question? And usually you'd get, oh yeah, I was on my phone, can you say it again? Or something like, actually, what do you mean by this? Can you provide us with an example? And then we'll get to another example after you kind of do it for us first. So again, open-ended questions, letting them ask you questions and making it as discussion-based as possible. This final challenge of navigating is guiding versus deciding. This was particularly hard for me. I'd read a book, I'd read every single policy a bajillion times. I have ideas, I have answers, but the goal was to let it be student-led. So you've done the research, you may know what you want to fix, but your role is to guide, not to decide. Students may point out something that you haven't considered, and it will be easier to inspire action if they're invested in the answer because they got to partake in coming up with it themselves. Now let's talk about some of the wins instead of some of the stuff that didn't work.
So our successes, because we did achieve something, right? We didn't just not. So youth shared personal stories, which made our policy work more applicable. As I just shared before, we had one meeting, which I feel like there's always that one meeting where things just kind of shift, right? Where now things start clicking and the students start sharing more and you get to have a really nice conversation. So there was one meeting where our students, we started to ask them questions about the previous campuses and they started to share personal stories, and that encouraged other students to share more personal stories. And we were able to learn a lot about their school campus, regardless if they were middle school campuses. But we were able to now be like, okay, so you understand that there's an issue. We're seeing this. Now what we're talking about is the solutions, or how to have accountability for the solutions, right? We also had youth advocates speak to our youth on how they can establish change on their school campuses. That was a success because we were able to pull in youth who are doing similar work in a school campus nearby. And then our students were able to see, okay, this is something we can do. Oh, this is something that they did. And we have facilitators, we have resources, we can use them to our advantage. And this is something that we can actually do on our campus. And then lastly, our retention was consistent, which during a virtual school year, during all those Zoom meetings and a lot of other things that were occurring around us in our communities, it was really nice to have a group of, although they were small, 4 to 5 students, consistently come to our meetings every single week, because it showed that they cared. It showed that me and Maggie were not boring, and it showed that they were interested in the work, right? So it was really nice to be able to have them and build that relationship with them, to now have returners in our campus, actual cohorts on campus, and see them kind of just bloom and feel so much like there's such a shift in how they are. And granted, that could be a lot because now we're in person, but we'd also like to think that it's because they feel more comfortable in our group now that they've known us for a year.
General lessons learned: be flexible. The what is policy discussion specifically took a lot longer than we expected it to. So be ready to navigate, be ready to shift and spend more time on certain topics, especially if your students or your group, if you're working with adults, they latch onto a concept, an idea, a current event, an issue. Expand on that, take advantage of that, take time there to really sit in it and understand why, and brainstorm the changes. Even if it's not what you actually end up implementing or going for at the end of the line, it's still that brainstorming and that practice that'll make the policy you actually decide to change that much more of a success when you come to actually deciding what you're going to do. Remember, I'm just going to say it again, remember you're a facilitator, not the leader. You're there to discuss, you're there to listen. Spend the majority of your time listening to your group, let them share their opinions. They're going to tell you what they want, they're going to tell you what they need. Asking those open questions allows you to learn more and better support them. Your interest in them, learning about who they are and what they care about, is going to spark them to have more interest overall in what's happening. And then finally, activities and examples win. The more you can bring those in, the more you can show them the real life stuff, the more likely they are to understand what's going on, to be interested. They see success, they want to replicate that success. Some other things that you could throw in that we never did, because there was plenty of examples just ripe for the picking in our community. Use TV shows, use social media, use other things that are happening that your students are watching or absorbing as a way of guiding those discussions. We covered a lot, lots of different things. We wanted to leave some space here for anyone who has questions about the curriculum, the why, the lessons, the challenges, anything of that sort. And we are happy to answer any of those. Again, you can unmute, you can raise your hand, you can drop them in the chat. I'll recognize that typing does take a little bit of time, so we'll be patient.
Maggie and Alondra, I'm wondering if you all, I've looked through this curriculum several times. I've not watched every single video yet, but I'm wondering if you have, out of all of the resources linked in here, like a must-have, like a go-to favorite that went really, really well.
I can't remember the name. I'm gonna hold on. It's one that goes through the levels of power, and it's very animated. And so, and I believe it's one of the shorter videos. Let me open up the, Maggie, do you remember the name of it? You know which one I'm talking about?
No, I'm pretty sure it's the second one on the curriculum in the power section. Yeah, it was just short. The students got it. And it went through the 3 different types of power, which it just went across really well. So for communicating with students, that was definitely a good video.
I want to say it was Eric Liu. How to understand the types of power. And it goes through individual, organization, and state uses of power. So students understand the different levels, which it was really nice to watch, and just kind of compiles everything nicely.
Yeah. Students, for the most part, will understand state because they've taken some level of government, democracy, history of US, somewhere in that realm. They'll have learned a little bit about state power, but it does a good job of explaining the other ones really well. Now that school is back, what policy area you're working to change? So each of our school sites are interested in some different topics. We've got students who are interested in our dress code policy. And we've got students who are incredibly passionate about improving their school's gender neutral bathroom policy. Their school district just implemented a policy around pronouns. And so they want to lean into that policy and use it to leverage access to gender neutral facilities, which is really awesome. So those are their 2 areas of focus.
Yeah, our other school hasn't really shared a specific interest, but they are just excited to get started.
Okay, well, we can stay on the line for any questions. Alondra, do you want to just switch the slide over to our contact information? If you're sitting here and you're absorbing, or you want to really get your hands on that curriculum and come back to us with questions, we've thought through this a lot, the different barriers, the different brainstorms. So if you just want a workshop and activity and navigate it for your group, if you want to maybe help exploring other resources, looking at different videos and things like that, we're happy to workshop with you, to brainstorm, to share any of the different barriers or things that we came across, and the ways that we thought about. Specifically, we didn't cover it today, but the book that we read was a college level, so we took it down to high school. But it can, go even younger if you want to. So thinking about the things to consider when navigating it for a different population.